Let's get lifted on these ABC. 1, 2, 3. Everything you need is right in front of you. Right in front of you for these ABCs. Today, we're going to share some icons, a civil rights icon who you may or may not know. Dorothy Irene Height, born in 1912, passed away in April 2010 at 98 years young. Black Family Reunion celebration, an annual event begun in 1986 to celebrate and affirm African American families, is only one recent brainchild of Dorothy Height. For more than 50 years, a human rights activist and organizer in arenas from the local to the international, Height devoted her life to marshaling the creative energies of African American women and men for their own empowerment. Born in Richmond, Virginia, Height studied for a career in social work at New York and Columbia Universities. In the late 1930s, she became involved with the National Council of Negro Women, founded by Mary McLeod Bethune. 20 years later, she would assume the mantle of NCNW leadership. A veteran civil rights campaigner and organizer, Height has also shaped national and international policy on the rights of women. First in the early 1960s as a member of President Kennedy's Historic Commission on the Status of Women, and more recently in UN forums on women's political and economic issues. She helped lead and organize the March on Washington with Martin Luther King Jr. She's a name you must know, Dorothy Irene Height. Zora Neale Hurston, born in 1891, passed in 1960, flamboyant and proud. Zora Neale Hurston was a brilliant chronicler of African American life. Hurston grew up in Eatonville, Florida, the first incorporated all-Black township in the United States. Her imagination was fired by the rich and oral tradition of the rural South and her sense of self undistorted by prejudice. These are African American women knowledge cards from the Library of Congress. I used to climb to the top of one of the huge chinaberry trees, she wrote in her autobiography, and look out over the world. The most interesting thing that I saw was the horizon. It grew upon me that I ought to walk out to the horizon and see what the end of the world was like. Hurston set out to do just that, studying at Howard and Columbia Universities. She was a lively presence in the Harlem Renaissance before undertaking the field studies of Southern Black folklore that would be documented in the classic Mules and Men, 1935, and would permeate such luminous works of fiction as Their Eyes Were Watching God. Their Eyes Were Watching God, a book she wrote. Zora Neale Hurston is one of my favorites. She was, I would say, a historian. And one more, Patricia Roberts Harris. Born in 1924, passed in 1985, attorney, ambassador, cabinet member, Patricia Roberts Harris completed her undergraduate studies summa cum laude at Howard University in Washington, D.C. In 1960, after graduating with honors from Washington University's law school, she was admitted to practice before the U.S. Supreme Court and the District of Columbia Bar. Harris was granted tenure as professor of law at Howard University in 1963 and was named Dean of the University School of Law in 1969, becoming the first African American woman to head a law school in the United States. President Lyndon B. Johnson appointed Harris ambassador to Luxembourg. She was the first African American woman to be chosen for an ambassadorship. In 1977, President Jimmy Carter appointed her to the post of Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, the first African American woman to hold a cabinet-level position. Harris went on to become a Secretary of Health and Human Services in 1979. Again, knowledge cards, photo courtesy of the Bethune Museum, Pomegranate Publications. We stand on the shoulders, huge shoulders. The bar is high. Thank you for learning with me. Let's get lifted. Let's get lifted. Let's get lifted on these ABCs. 1, 2, 3. Everything you need is right in front of you. Right in front of you with these ABCs. Thank you for learning with me.